Nordic Ancestry. Off the northern edge of Europe, where volcanic rock meets the North Atlantic and winter darkness stretches for months, Iceland has harbored a significant genetic discovery, a single inherited change that protects the brain from Alzheimer's disease. The variant sits in a gene called APP, which controls a protein that slowly builds up in the brains of Alzheimer's patients over decades. Icelanders who carry this version produce less of that buildup, and in a world where dementia quietly dismantles memory, identity, and independence, that difference can mean years of preserved clarity that most people never get. The traditional diet adds another layer. Built around seafood for generations, it delivered consistent omega-3 fatty acids, fats that support the heart and help maintain brain cell structure across a lifetime. Icelanders have been eating this way for 1,000 years, long before anyone invented nutrition science. Genetic protection from plaque buildup, combined with a diet that keeps brain inflammation low, means the brain enters old age from a much stronger starting point. Iceland's longevity story is ultimately about precision, one small genetic change and a lifetime of the right nutrition, both working to protect the one thing that makes a long life worth living. Amish Ancestry. In the flat farmlands of northern Indiana, Old Order Amish families have built a life deliberately unchanged by modern convenience, days structured entirely around physical work, community, and a faith that treats simplicity as a virtue. Certain families here carry a mutation of the SERPINE1 gene that prevents the PAI1 protein from building up in the body. PAI1 rises naturally as we get older and has been directly linked to cellular aging and tissue breakdown. Keeping it low is essentially a cheat code for anti-aging. Those with specific SERPINE1 mutations also show longer telomeres, which are the protective caps on DNA strands that shrink as we age, like the plastic tips on shoelaces slowly wearing down. They also have lower insulin levels, lower rates of diabetes, and lifespans that stretch longer than relatives without the mutation. Daily life adds to that foundation. Amish communities log step counts that would impress competitive athletes, driven entirely by farming, building, and physical labor woven into an ordinary day. Decades of that movement keeps blood sugar stable, preserves muscle, and slows the metabolic decline that shortens most modern lives. Tight family networks and intergenerational living make isolation nearly impossible here. And isolation, it turns out, is one of aging's most underrated accelerants. The Amish didn't set out to crack the code on aging. They built a life where almost everything about it works in their favor. Ashkenazi Jewish Ancestry. For centuries, Ashkenazi Jewish communities moved across Central and Eastern Europe, settling, dispersing, and rebuilding through some of history's most turbulent chapters. That long journey left a distinct genetic signature, and it turns out to be remarkably protective. Many Ashkenazi centenarians carry a version of the CETP gene that produces larger HDL particles. HDL is the cholesterol your doctor actually likes, the kind that pulls fatty buildup away from artery walls. Larger particles do that job more effectively, and doing it well for decades means the heart keeps working longer before anything goes wrong. A second gene called APOC3 adds another layer. People with a favorable version tend to have lower fat levels in the blood, better blood sugar control, and lower blood pressure. Three of the biggest drivers of cardiovascular aging, all running quieter at once. A third advantage shows up in how cells respond to growth signals. Certain variants appear to keep that growth pressure lower across a lifetime, which matters because unchecked cell growth is one of the primary ways cancer takes hold. Heart disease and cancer end more lives than anything else in the modern world, and across three separate genetic pathways, Ashkenazi Ancestry appears to be turning down the volume on both. Pakistani Ancestry. Tucked into three narrow valleys of the Hindu Kush Mountains in northwest Pakistan, the Kalash have lived in near-complete isolation for centuries, and that isolation quietly concentrated something remarkable in their genome. The most visible advantage shows up in muscle function. A gene called ACTN3 controls how fast twitch muscle fibers perform, the kind behind sustained strength, physical endurance, and the ability to keep working hard across a lifetime. A version linked to stronger muscle output appears in roughly 93% of Kalash individuals. Centuries of mountain survival kept favoring it until it became the norm, written into nearly every body born into these valleys. The heart carries similar evidence, a gene called RYR2, which governs how the heart muscle contracts and recovers under physical stress, also carries selection signals in this population, suggesting the cardiovascular system was being shaped alongside the muscular one, generation after generation of people climbing, carrying, and enduring. Where genetics alone wasn't enough, culture filled the gap. The Kalash consumed dairy despite carrying genes that should make digesting it difficult, and fermentation became the solution, passed down through generations long before anyone understood the biology or invented refrigerators. These valleys preserved more than a way of life. They preserved a genome shaped by centuries of hard living that still reflects every generation that survived here before. Okinawan Ancestry. Off the southern tip of Japan lies a chain of islands that existed as its own kingdom for much of history, trading with China, fishing the Pacific, and growing food in small coastal gardens. That rhythm of modest, purposeful living produced one of the longest-lived populations. Many Okinawans carry variants in the FOXO3 gene that appear to shift the body's default setting toward long-term maintenance. When nutrients run low or the body comes under stress, FOXO3 helps activate repair processes rather than pushing through the damage. It works less like a longevity gene and more like a survival setting that stays switched on longer than usual. The gene works best when the life around it cooperates. The traditional Okinawan diet was low in calories but high in nutrients, built around sweet potatoes, vegetables, and small amounts of protein. Paired with a cultural habit of stopping before feeling full, this kept insulin levels stable and metabolic strain low across an entire lifetime. Tight community bonds, lifelong social roles, and consistent daily movement complete the picture. In Okinawa, the biology, the food, and the way people lived all reinforced each other across generations, each one making the others more effective. Few places in human history have managed to align those forces so completely for so long. Mediterranean Ancestry. On a rugged Mediterranean island, tucked into steep mountain villages that stayed isolated for centuries, men are living to 100 at rates that have puzzled researchers for decades. Sardinia's longevity advantage is essentially a live long and prosper stack, where genetics, daily movement, and community structure all reinforce each other across an entire lifetime. The island's long history of isolation concentrated certain protective genetic patterns across generations, giving researchers one of the richest longevity datasets ever assembled from a single population. Traditional shepherding through steep mountain terrain meant a lifetime of walking, climbing, and physical labor woven into daily life rather than scheduled into a gym. That's the famous Zone 2 cardio fitness influencers rave about, and Sardinian shepherds have been doing it for centuries without a gym membership or joining a run club. What makes Sardinia especially unusual is who is living longest. In most populations, women outlive men by a significant margin, but in these mountain villages, that gap nearly disappears. Researchers believe decades of physically active, purposeful work, combined with strong family networks and intergenerational living, protected men from the cardiovascular decline that shortens so many lives elsewhere. Sardinia shows that longevity is less a matter of individual luck and more a matter of what a place quietly builds into everyday life. Costa Rican Ancestry. A 60-year-old man on Costa Rica's Nicoya Peninsula has a higher chance of reaching 100 than almost anywhere else in the Western world, and the advantage is strong enough that it disappears when people leave. The most distinctive driver is a cultural concept called plan de vida, a life plan, a deeply held reason to get up in the morning. Communities that consistently reinforce purpose and belonging shift how long people live, likely through lower depression risk, healthier daily behaviors, and a stress response that stays calibrated rather than chronically overloaded. The traditional diet builds on that foundation. Beans, corn, and squash have anchored Nicoyan eating for generations, fiber-rich, slow-digesting staples that keep blood sugar steady and support a gut environment linked to lower inflammation across a lifetime. The water adds to it naturally, carrying high levels of calcium and magnesium that support bone density and cardiovascular function when absorbed consistently over decades. Outdoor work, walking, and physical labor, woven into ordinary daily life, keep vascular health intact without a structured workout in sight. Nicoya's longevity is best understood as a complete system: purpose, food, minerals, and movement all working together in a place where the conditions for a long life were simply never lost. Greek Ancestry. On the Greek island of Ikaria, growing old was never treated as a withdrawal from life. It was simply the next role in a community that kept running because everyone stayed in it. That social fabric turns out to be one of the most powerful longevity forces the island has to offer. Older Icarians remain embedded in daily village life, shared meals, conversations, and responsibilities that keep purpose intact well into old age. Chronic isolation is one of aging's most reliable accelerants, and Icaria's village structure makes it culturally almost impossible. The landscape enforces movement in the same way: steep roads, terraced gardens, and villages connected by walking paths mean that daily transportation doubles as daily exercise. Low intensity, consistent and sustained across decades. That kind of movement preserves muscle mass and keeps blood sugar stable, protecting the physical function that determines whether old age affects the body or is merely a number going up. The traditional diet layers on top: olive oil, legumes, and plant foods eaten the same way for generations. Decades of that pattern steadily reduces cardiovascular wear in ways that only become visible later in life. Midday rest and flexible daily rhythms round out the picture, keeping chronic stress low and blood pressure stable across a lifetime. Icaria's advantage is a social system that makes healthy aging the path of least resistance. Caucasus Ancestry. Stretching between the Black Sea and the Caspian Basin, the Caucasus Mountains have shaped one of the world's most distinctive food cultures, a tradition of fermentation, mountain living, and deep community roots that shows up most clearly in Georgia, where it has been practiced and studied for generations. For centuries, Georgians, Armenians, and Azerbaijanis have consumed fermented dairy like matsoni alongside other cultured foods woven throughout daily eating. Fermented foods increase the diversity of bacteria living in the gut, and a more diverse gut microbiome produces compounds that help regulate inflammation across the whole body. Chronic inflammation drives heart disease, cognitive decline, and metabolic breakdown, and a diet that consistently keeps it lower across a lifetime shifts the odds of reaching old age in good health. Mountain life adds a physical foundation on top of that. Climbing, carrying, and walking uneven terrain across decades preserves muscle strength, balance, and stable blood sugar, the biological pillars that determine whether old age stays functional or becomes fragile. Caucasus cultures have historically kept elders at the center of daily life as storytellers, decision makers, and active participants in family and community. Sustained social purpose keeps the mind engaged and the body moving in ways that compound across the years. In this part of the world, the food, the land, and the community have always worked together, and longevity has followed naturally from that. Japanese Ancestry. Japan is a nation of islands shaped by centuries of rice farming, coastal fishing, and a food culture that treated moderation as a virtue long before nutrition science had a word for it. That accumulated way of living, steady, varied, and rarely excessive, sits underneath one of the highest life expectancies ever recorded in the modern world. Fewer people in Japan carry a gene variant called APOE epsilon 4, one of the strongest risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. When fewer people in a population carry that variant, fewer people face the highest odds of aging's most devastating outcome. Centuries of eating seaweed gave many Japanese people gut bacteria capable of breaking it down in ways most human digestive systems cannot. That process releases compounds that support gut health, reduce inflammation, and help regulate the immune system across a lifetime, a microbial adaptation built slowly through generations of the same traditional diet. A food culture built around portion control and minimally processed meals keeps average body weight low across the population. That's decades of stable blood sugar, less strain on the heart, and lower chronic disease risk compounding year after year. Large studies also link higher green tea consumption to lower rates of death from cardiovascular disease. Then, there's Ikigai, the Japanese concept of having a reason to get up in the morning. Older adults with a strong sense of Ikigai stay more physically active, more socially connected, and more consistent in caring for their health as they age. Each advantage is modest on its own. Together, across a lifetime, they become something else entirely. Amazonian Ancestry. Deep in the lowland forests of the Bolivian Amazon, indigenous communities like the Tsimane have spent generations living the way most of human history unfolded, hunting, fishing, farming, and moving through a landscape that demands constant physical effort just to get through the day. That life, it turns out, produces the cleanest arteries ever recorded in medical history. Tsimane adults in their 70s and 80s show coronary artery health that cardiologists typically expect in people decades younger, the lowest rates of heart disease measured in any population using modern imaging. The protection comes from a lifetime of sustained movement and whole food eating. Hours of daily walking, carrying, and farming keep blood pressure low, insulin sensitivity high, and the biological conditions that feed arterial plaque from ever building up in the first place. What surprised scientists most was a paradox hidden in the data. Tsimane adults carry high levels of inflammation from fighting infections in a tropical environment, and yet their arteries stay clean. Turns out, most chronic inflammation that damages the heart comes from metabolic disease, decades of poor diet, inactivity, and excess body fat. but Tsimane perfected balanced diets and active lifestyles, along with their bodies working overtime to fight off infections. This combination became the best longevity cheat code. Arterial aging, it seems, is less an inevitable feature of getting older and more a reflection of the world the body has been living in. Inuit Ancestry. The Greenlandic Inuit built a civilization at the edge of what human biology can sustain, hunting marine mammals across frozen water, enduring months of darkness, and eating a diet made entirely of fat and protein. That extreme environment rewrote parts of the genome, a cluster of genes called FADS, which governs how the body breaks down and uses fatty acids, shows some of the strongest adaptation signals recorded in a human population. Thousands of years of marine fat-heavy eating reshaped how fat is metabolized, how inflammation is regulated, and how energy is managed at a cellular level. 3 biological processes sitting at the heart of cardiovascular aging. Routine cold exposure deepened that foundation. Living in Arctic temperatures activates metabolic processes that improve glucose regulation and energy efficiency, advantages that compound across a lifetime when the environment stays consistent. Those adaptations come with an important condition attached. Genetic advantages are specialized tools built for a specific world, and when Inuit communities shifted rapidly toward refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed food, the same metabolic machinery that once protected began driving disease instead. The environment changed faster than the genome could follow. A population shaped by one of Earth's most demanding landscapes carries one of biology's clearest lessons, that the body is always a product of the world it evolved inside, for better and for worse. Southern Chinese Ancestry. Along the karst mountain regions of southern China, where limestone peaks rise out of river valleys and rural villages have stayed rooted for centuries, communities have produced centenarian populations that keep drawing the attention of aging researchers. Bama County in Guangxi has become the most studied example. What makes Bama distinct from most longevity populations is that the land itself appears to be doing some of the work. The region's soil and water carry elevated levels of minerals like magnesium, cobalt, and selenium, elements that support enzyme function, cardiovascular health, and the body's own antioxidant systems. Drink and eat from that environment for a lifetime, and the exposure adds up in ways that are hard to replicate by taking a handful of supplement pills. Selenium is where the story gets most interesting. The body uses it to run critical antioxidant processes that protect cells from damage over time, and Bama sits in a naturally selenium-enriched zone. The catch is that selenium works within a narrow biological window. Too little accelerates cellular damage, and too much becomes toxic. But miraculously, Bama's environment appears to land consistently in the range where protection is highest. The traditional diet built around local vegetables, legumes, and minimally processed food keeps metabolic health stable across a lifetime. On top of that, mountainous terrain keeps people moving daily, and tight rural communities keep them socially embedded well into old age. In these valleys, the longevity advantage doesn't come from a single gene or cultural practice. It seeps up through the ground. Southern African Ancestry. At the northern edge of South Africa, where savanna meets subtropical forest and the borders of Zimbabwe and Mozambique converge, Bantu-speaking communities like the Vavenda and Songa have built one of the most remarkable aging profiles on the continent. The Vembe district keeps producing centenarians at rates that have drawn serious attention. The advantage starts on the plate. Traditional meals here are built around wild leafy vegetables called miraho, greens foraged from the surrounding landscape, carrying exceptional levels of folate, vitamin C, and beta-carotene. Folate keeps red blood cell production running cleanly. Vitamin C supports immune function and holds connective tissue together across decades. Beta-carotene feeds the body's antioxidant systems. Eaten together and consistently across a lifetime, they're the closest thing to a natural anti-aging cheat code the land provides. Centuries in a malaria-heavy environment shaped an immune system built for more than fighting parasites. That sustained pressure favored immune diversity, a broader toolkit for recognizing threats, and that same diversity helps keep chronic inflammation regulated across a lifetime. Deeper skin pigmentation absorbs UV radiation before it can damage DNA inside skin cells, protection that compounds across decades of intense equatorial sun. The Vavenda maintain cultural rules that protect the land itself, restricting deforestation, preserving water sources. In this part of the world, looking after the land and looking after yourself have always been the same thing. Loma Linda, Seventh-day Adventists. Not every longevity advantage is written into Ancestry. In a suburban city east of Los Angeles, a community of Seventh-day Adventists is outliving the rest of California by nearly a decade, and everything that protects them was built entirely by choice. Adventist men live approximately 7.3 years longer than other Californians on average, and women 4.4 years longer, with the gap widening further among vegetarians within the community. These numbers make Loma Linda one of the most rigorously documented longevity populations in the world. The protective stack is consistent and clear. Low rates of smoking and alcohol use alone shift mortality curves significantly, since both rank among the fastest ways to age the cardiovascular system. A plant-forward diet high in fiber keeps metabolic health stable across decades. Weekly structured rest and regular community gatherings reduce chronic stress and social isolation, two of aging's most reliable accelerants. What makes Loma Linda genuinely remarkable is how identity drives all of it. When a community treats health behaviors as a core expression of who they are, adherence to a healthy lifestyle stops requiring willpower and becomes automatic. Habits maintained that way, consistently, across an entire lifetime, are what longevity is built on. Every other section in this video explored advantages written into Ancestry. Loma Linda's message is different. The same results are available to anyone willing to build the same system around their life. If you like this video and want to learn more about different genetic ancestries, check out these other videos.